Welcome everybody to the World Chess Championship. This is Game 6 between the world number 1, Magnus Carlsen, and the world number 2, Fabiano Caruana. I'm Anna Rudolph and I'm going to be your host alongside with our chess expert, Judith Polgar.
Hi, nice to be here again.
Judith, we've had a lovely video. We have all this footage. Thank you so much. We have a great live audience already here with us. I was just going to say that we've had some really nice days here in London, beautiful weather. We were filming in the Hyde Park. That was the footage that you could see at the beginning. And we were discussing already yesterday that it's great for chess that these major events are brought to cities like New York and London, so more people can come and see it.
Absolutely. I think it's a real treat to the chess world that we have in these big capital cities like New York and London. And here at the venue, the situation, the atmosphere is heated up very much already.
Indeed. Tell us about yesterday's game briefly.
Well, yesterday's game was very interesting. Of course, we always guess around it what will be the opening choice of Fabiano, and today we're going to discuss it, what will be the choice of Magnus. And actually, there were no real surprises in the very beginning of the game. It was exactly the same opening as in the previous rounds, where Fabiano played with white Rossolimo. And there was a little change in his preparation. Already in move 4, he had deviated from the previous games. But after that, in move 6, already he made move 7. He made a very aggressive pawn move, which is known, this pawn move, but it was still a kind of a surprise, I think, for all of us, that it was a pawn sacrifice where Fabiano wanted to take initiative and try to show that he's better prepared. But actually it was a case where it didn't go through. So Magnus was well prepared. Also, he was very much aware of the situation and controlling everything in the opening. And around move 20, it was already at a point where Magnus had 2 pawns down, but still he gained the initiative already with black. And I had the feeling that it was more difficult for Fabiano. He had to make only moves in order to balance the game and keep the equality. And after that, it was not too much what Magnus was creating. I had the feeling that Magnus could play a little bit for more. If he would play at one point instead of the king march, he would fix the pawn with b5, if for the people who saw the game yesterday. But somehow I have the feeling that Magnus is losing his patience, you know? And it's not the first time I have this feeling that in such a World Championship match, every little gain you have to appreciate and you have to smell it that it's there, and one little inaccuracy after another can cause trouble for any of the player. But somehow I felt that he was very happy that he created a very good game for himself. But after that, he could not push it and give a hard time for Fabiano. So it was a draw, and now it's 2.5, 2.5.
You said that you feel like he's losing his patience, and it's not the first time that you see him in this situation. Does it remind us of the World Championship match in New York in a different style, of course, because in New York he was very upset that Karyakin was just defending and defending in every single game. Here we can't say the same about the challenger. Fabiano does want to win. He does go for sharp lines. He sacrificed the pawn yesterday. Still, the result is a draw. Do you think this is upsetting Magnus in a way?
I think not yet. That's what I would say. That's the precise, because I think now we really reached a crucial part of the match, really the middle of the match, game 6 and 7, for different reasons. First of all, because Magnus is going to be taking the white pieces today, and actually after the free day in game 7, because they are going to switch and alternate the system. So it will be 2 white for Magnus. And also because it's the middle of the match. When you cross the halfway, it's already psychologically, you have to deal with it and you have to reanalyze, reassess the situation. If it's going to be 3-3, let's say, that can cause serious pressure and tension for Magnus, I think, as we saw in New York, that actually in game 8, I remember that the way he played with the white pieces, he was like freaking out. He just knew one thing, that there is no result of a draw that day. It has to be decisive either way. It was like I had the feeling that he really had this in himself, that he just doesn't want to see a draw anymore, no matter what happens. And actually, it turned out that he made mistakes. He provoked things so much that it was mostly him who lost the game, not Karyakin who won and created the opportunity for himself.
He must have worked on the psychological aspect, so we are sure that he is not going to get into the same mistake. He's not going to do the same, that he will just lose his patience and go all in. At least that is what we are predicting. And mentioning just the two white games, since Judith pointed out that it's not only today that Magnus has the white pieces, but also in the next game. That is something that Magnus highlighted at the press conference as an opportunity to strike. So it does happen at round-robin tournaments as well, that the player doubles white or black. And he said that when you have double white, it's an opportunity to strike, and the double black is your most vulnerable point of the tournament in general. How do you see that?
Absolutely. It was interesting that he also pointed out this. So it's not only the people from outside putting pressure on him, but he's putting pressure on himself by saying so, I think. But it's absolutely true. And this is really special that we came to a point where it's game 6. We are just reaching the halfway of the match. And I think, of course, Magnus had to be thinking and preparing quite a bit and put the mindset of himself somehow differently as before. Because what he showed in his previous games with the white pieces, he cannot be at all too proud of those 2 games. Because so far Fabiano surprised him. He couldn't handle it in a way he wanted to. But so it's a big question now if he's going to repeat any of his previous first move, D4 or C4, or I'm betting maybe there is going to be an E4 today.
What is your personal prediction? You say E4.
I think there is a good chance for him to play E4. On the other hand, I believe that he's taking kind of a mini match in this World Championship, really focusing kind of together the 2 games, today and the next game, game 6 and 7. I think maybe there is a special kind of strategy that he's trying something today with white pressing, and then if it doesn't work, then in game 7, again, he knows already possibly what he has in mind.
It will be interesting to see. There's a 3-day separating game 6 and 7 that gives some time for Team Fabiano to decide. As you mentioned, they take the match game by game. So what happens today will determine their strategy for game 7. And also, of course, we are yet to see whether the video footage that was published, unfortunately, for Fabiano, will that have any effect on the match, the screen? I'm sure most of you are familiar with the story. It was all around in the news, including in the CNN and the Guardian, that a training camp filmed with Fabiano. So did Magnus do. Play Magnus has published training videos of Magnus, and Fabiano sort of did the same, but there was a slight mistake in terms of the editing, perhaps, or the timing of the video. We don't know exactly what happened there, but the computer screen was not supposed to be shown with the variations that Fabiano prepared for the match, very specific variations, the Queen's Gambit decline with Rook E8, the Fianchetto Grunfeld, and the Petroff. The Petroff was there, couple of lines of the Petroff. So we'll come back to this when we see the first move of Magnus. But for now, let's just see what our visitors thought about the venue yesterday.
It was what I was hoping for. I was hoping for an exciting game. We chose round 5, hoping that coming off the rest day it would be, a well-fought match. And seeing the Sicilian and seeing B4 just validated that, and I was excited for the rest of the game from then on.
Well, the play was kind of interesting. It was one of the most exciting World Championship games that I've seen so far. Not a very exciting result, though, but I guess I can live with that.
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, B4 just makes for a very unbalanced position. And I got the feeling, I couldn't come up with the moves that Magnus came up. I would have struggled to stay on the board if I was black.
I thought it was a good one, actually. I was excited to see that it sort of went a little bit off-piste early on. a bit of excitement, a bit of opening novelty for the likes of me, not really understanding what on earth's going on. So that's always good fun to be a little bit flummoxed by what's happening on the board. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good game.
So today's game was very fascinating. Lots of pressure put on both players, and I loved the striking moves by Fabiano. It was really impressive to see.
I was hoping they wouldn't have another draw, given the last few games were a draw, but, you know, the computer always predicted them being equal, and they were pretty equal the whole time, so every time they made a move, we're like, oh, this person's ahead now, no, the other one's ahead. So it was a good day. I think it was really exciting, actually, to watch.
I think it was great, fantastic fight, and I thought Magnus got caught in the opening, but surprisingly, he didn't get caught. Because I think he knew until move 16 the theory.
We didn't really know what to expect coming here, coming to the match, and getting to watch the live broadcast, getting to go into the players, the viewing area, and then being able to attend the post-game press conference was everything I was hoping for.
It was good to have the commentary as well. I enjoyed watching the commentators play all the moves out. And I find it easier to follow if I'm here in person, actually, than if I would be at home watching it by myself. So it's nice to be with a friend.
This is our first time we came for the championship.
Yeah, so we're here to watch the match and then also to explore London and get to learn the city.
I think 6-6 Carlsen. I think it's just going to go all the way to the wire. Carlsen's the better rapid player, so I think he'll probably try and edge it out on that final day or two, whatever it is, the rapid section. There's just so little to choose between the two players, to be honest, that seems like the most likely outcome for me.
Yeah, Team Fabi.
Yep. And all the women players out there as well. I think it's really important.
Carlsen in the rapid play.
Well, if there's a tie break, I think he'll win.
That's true.
But we don't want to see 12 draws.
Fabi's got a chance.
Obviously, we have fans for both Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. What seems to be a common feature is that most of the chess fans predict that the tiebreak would favor Magnus. What do you think about that, Judith?
Yeah, that's kind of circulating between amateurs and also even with the bigger experts. And that's what it shows, that Carlsen's results in rapid and also in blitz, as he's a world champion quite a few times in both categories, that probably Magnus would have better chances there. And it's interesting that people already commentating on that
after 5 draws,
probably it's going to be 6-6, and the playoff is going to be. It was pretty clear that in the previous match against Karyakin, Magnus was very happy to play the playoff, and actually there was not real chance for Karyakin to be defending himself. And in principle, we can say that probably he has better chances, looking the previous games for them between each other and also the results what they have in the stamp controls. But I think there are still a lot to come, even if we would reach the playoff, where the playoff would have 4 games.
Yes.
And then the extra playoff if it's equal. But I think really there are a lot to be seen, and I'm not sure we're going to reach a playoff at the end.
I also think that there might be no tie breaks. Plus, I have the feeling that Magnus wants to prove that he's the best in classical time control already. So I don't think that his strategy is to reach 6-6 and then go for the tie breaks. Maybe when we are in game 11, game 12, and it's still a tie, that could change. But I'm pretty sure that he wants to prove the world that he is clearly the best by winning in the classical format.
Well, and also it's very difficult to think that way, even if he believes in himself and he knows that he would be probably the favorite in a playoff. I mean, 12 games is too much to play it that way, that you would be happy with already before the match that you're happy with 6-6. Though maybe he thinks that 6-6 is still fine because he will have great chances in the playoff. So I wouldn't think that he's not thinking in back of his mind that 6-6 is still not a big deal. So
the world champion is the first player to arrive in the box. They are playing behind a double-layer glass that is soundproof. So from one side, they can only see a mirror reflection of themselves. And on the other side of the glass, our visitors can be looking at the game and observing the players. Fabiano Caruana is now taking his seat.
And of course, the players are making their routine movements. All the pieces were adjusted at Jadub. Before the game, it's very common with the players that they do that before the start of the game.
Do you have
now
any
it's Fabiano's
habit?
turn to do the same. You
I
see.
was going to ask you, Judith, if you have any habit on which piece you adjust first or last, or if you do it at the same time, symmetrical.
I was doing it, with 2 hands, and I was adjusting it. Also, it was kind of a habit, but I think most of the players has it. It's just ritual that you do before the game. It's like getting ready for the game.
Yeah. By the way, the lady you can see also from this camera angle, she's the deputy arbiter, Nana Alexandria, a 3-time challenger for the women's world title. And actually yesterday, she came to us right after the game was over, and she said that she had a game for this B4 pawn sacrifice, playing with the white pieces,
Back in
3
69.
decades ago.
Yeah. More.
So that was
More,
really
nearly 50
peculiar
years
that the deputy arbiter had the exact same opening in her game quite a few years ago. And it was the same until the moment that was knight takes b4 and even the
later
a6,
on
a3.
it was move 10 when it was a deviation from her game.
So Magnus improved the play that Miss Alexandria's opponent showed in that game 30 or 40 years ago. Can't remember the exact date of the game. Today, the ceremonial first move will be played by Kay Burley, and we hope that Kay can visit us later. She's a prominent newscaster. She has hosted more live television than anyone. She has the record of the longest hours on live television, and I think we have plenty of questions to her, so we hope that she will join us in the studio after making the first move for Magnus Carlsen.
It seems like in the box, pretty lot of tension. And I'm sure Fabiano is very curious also what will be the first move.
Which pawn
played.
will be pushed? The E pawn, the D pawn, or the C pawn? Or none of
possibly
them?
knight f3.
Knight f3.
Yeah.
We have so many options. I think I'll make a quick poll before Kay makes the first move. Can you please raise your hands if you think it's going to be e4? We need to be very quick. Okay, plenty of votes. d4. I think that's similar to e4. What about c4? Somewhat less than e4 and d4. Knight f3. A few votes for knight f3. e4 and d4 have won the vote here with our live audience, and we shall see what Magnus Carlsen is going to ask from Kay. Is that the e pawn or the d pawn? E pawn, e4.
Unless he's going to be taking it back.
Let's see if he takes it back or it stays on the board. It is the move of the game. Magnus Carlsen finally goes for e4, and we shall see if Fabiano responds with the Petroff.
Yeah.
Knight f3. Is it going to be knight f6? That was Fabiano's preparation in the last many months. Knight f6 indeed. Wow. So this is from the screen capture. Not that Magnus couldn't predict that the Petroff would be played.
Well, it's not a surprise for either player to have this on the board. And it's interesting that Carlsen practically in every game he starts a different starting move, which obviously he will run out very soon. So, but I also consider that probably this is a good time to switch and play e4 in this game 6. But interesting that after knight f6 now, if I see it correctly, Magnus is hesitating which continuation to play right now. Well, of course, obviously we can say he's not surprised at all.
No.
It's not.
It would be very difficult to be surprised when the Petroff is Fabiano's main weapon, and it was also included in the video.
Well, they also had a game this summer in the Petroff where actually Magnus had a better position, very, very promising position, but he couldn't collect the full point. we
That
have
was
on the
a
board.
very strange game from the Sinkfield Cup this August, where Magnus had this really promising advantage, and suddenly Fabiano found some very precise defensive moves, such as King H8, Knight G8 was the plan in that game. If you have seen the game, I'm sure you remember that it looked so weird for Black, but it managed to hold the position together.
On the other hand, now in move 3, Knight D3 was made, which is a very unusual move. Knight F3 is the most common move, and also Knight C4. So definitely just to understand, I mean, on Knight F3 move, here just instead of Knight D3, there were more than 35,000 games, and on Knight D3 there are definitely much less. So it's a great surprise for me also to play Knight D3. There are very, very few games. But of course, even good grandmasters are playing it. Probably Knight E4. Yes, sorry, we have quite a few moves already. Black took Knight E4, of course, taking back the pawn. Queen E2. In the meantime, I want to check it also, that what are the moves, the theory goes. Of course, Queen E7 is a must play, and Knight F4. Yeah, White's plan is very straightforward. Of course, he wants to go Knight D5. This is the primary idea of Knight F4, but also soon, if Black is going to defend that, White will develop with his pawn to D3 and then develop. I think actually it's kind of a logical choice by Magnus to go for E4. And so now after Knight F4, Black has different options. Of course, he has to deal with the threat of Knight D5. So Knight F6 is a move which is kind of maybe the most natural. Also, Black can go C6, but it means that he already commits himself, that maybe he's not happy, because many times Black is going, let's say, Knight F6, and later on he develops with his Knight to C6, not to D7. So it's a matter of principle, strategic question, whether he's going to go Knight F6 or C6. Well, it also means that, of course, I think we're going to see a long game. It's going to be a maneuvering game. It's going to be positional mainly. It's going to be a slow development in this game. But on the other hand, I think for Magnus, it is a good choice, to be honest, because
the Knight D3 variation.
This variation to go for this kind of solid position, because he, as we saw in different positions, he can create difficulties out of almost nothing. And also with Fabiano, I saw in the previous game, for example, while we were discussing around move 20, that Black can take the initiative. And Fabiano, in the press conference, was absolutely, he was convinced that, well, he had no problem. He was who was hesitating how to continue. And he absolutely gave the impression as he was the one possibly to play for whether he has something more than equalish or not. So he was kind of, I think, a little bit more. He was a little bit more optimistic than
what
the
his position was
suggesting. And of course, Magnus was very happy with his position, and he was extremely comfortable with the initiative he had and created. So I think from this point of view, it can go in a way that White can create something without people noticing it, and eventually Black has an unpleasant situation, because that was exactly the scenario in the summer. It was a Sinkfield Club, or
yes,
or
at the Sinkfield Cup. Sorry, Judith, I need to interrupt you, because Fabiano didn't play Knight F6 nor pawn to C6. He went Knight C6. Which I don't see any other game in the database for. Do you have any?
No, I had 2 games only after Knight F6.
I see the same. So I had 3 games for this position, Knight F6 or pawn to C6. Knight C6 seems to be a novelty.
Yeah, the idea is, I guess, immediately if knight d5, which I was mentioning, that this is the plan for white. Black would be going queen e5, knight takes c7, king goes out, attacking the knight. And if simply knight a8, I guess knight d4. And then some great surprises in the air from black side. So white has to go something like queen d3, and then black would be winning the queen already. I guess knight c5, knight c2. So actually black would win already. It's only move 11. So this is the reason knight d5, knight c7 is not possible. Of course, here after knight e5, knight c3 would be something to consider. But immediately white cannot gain material, this is for sure. Let's see what happens if white goes simply d3. I'm wondering if knight d4 can be considered, and after queen e4, let's say queen takes e4, d takes e4, knight c2, king d1, knight a1, and then I think b3, and then bishop d2. Bishop b2 and grabbing the knight. At first glance, it seems like black is not going to save his knight, even though black can try to play bishop e7 with the idea to defend the knight after bishop b2 with bishop f6. But I think, for example, after bishop e7, knight d5 can be a move. But of course, we have to look at it later on longer, and knight d5
Knight
was
d5, we are
played.
entering the most critical variation. Judith,
Extremely interesting.
Judith, I thought we were expecting a maneuvering long game, but I'm glad it's not the case.
And actually, knight d4 was played instantly.
Wow.
So it's like, wow.
It's super preparation and the trade of queens. Most normal.
Well, not in a very, very boring way, I must say. But we ended up, in very interesting way of exchanging queens.
Both knights are hanging.
Well, the
E7
question
and
is
E2.
whether can white play knight d5 back. Probably black goes, well, the question is whether black goes back to d4 or grabs the bishop. How does this work? If knight c1, knight takes c7, king goes out, knight a8. It's definitely not a natural knight placement, what we see here.
Knight
But I
d5
think
is on
here,
the board.
Wow. Wow.
Well,
They made sure that we have the entertainment for today.
indeed, and I think they also want to clarify that the Petroff is not boring. I'm still in shock, basically. The knight d3 variation and the knight c6, which was never played. The knight goes back to d4.
Yeah,
It's the
knight
most
d4.
natural game in the world. Same position as before, but now without the queens. Knight a3,
Knight
defending the
a3.
c2 pawn.
Well, it's also not the most obvious move, because there was another way of defending it with bishop d3, which after black would go knight c5, I guess, and if after knight c7 king goes out, white would take on d3 on a8. Black grabs, knight takes d3, takes knight c2, king d1, knight takes a1, and then both of the knights are in the corner, and none of them will be able to escape. But probably black should be completely fine. Actually, as after b3, I guess bishop e6 looks like a promising move. So after bishop b2, black can get 2 pawns for the knight. And but okay, let's go back to the position where we stopped and what we have on the board.
Once again, we will have some help to understand what's going on in Game 6. Today's guest is a prominent presenter, newscaster. She has hosted more live hours on television than anyone else. Kay Burley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. How lovely. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Very good afternoon.
Okay, how did it feel to make the first move for Magnus?
I was so nervous, really. I was so, because I'm used to being completely in control of the situation. And there was so much tension. And I wandered on and I said hello and nobody looked at me. And it was like, oh. Okay, they didn't even look up. And I thought, oh, maybe you shouldn't say hello. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, don't shake. Maybe I don't know what to do. And so I just stood there really quietly, like a little girl, waiting and waiting and waiting. And then Magnus told me, and I'd practiced all the moves. I'd read up all the I was going to do the retin move? I'd practiced that. I thought, oh, maybe he'll want that, because that's one of his famous moves, isn't it, of course? So I thought I might try that one, but no, he went, I was like, okay. So that's what I did.
I think you did a great job. We're very impressed. We were watching from the cameras.
Thank you, thank you.
It was very professional way of pushing the pawn. Is it your first time at the chess tournament?
It is the first time.
What is your impression?
Oh, amazing. It's so glitzy and fabulous, but so it's not serious, it's just really professional. I have been playing chess since I was a little girl. My granddad taught me when I was maybe 6 or 7. And so I've been playing ever since. And I never thought, ever in my wildest dreams, that I would be making the first move for Magnus and Fabiano. When I worked on my local newspaper in Wigan, Nigel Short, some of you might have heard of him. I used to interview him all the time. I think he's the vice president now, isn't he?
Of FIDE, which is the International Chess Organization.
Yeah. So it reminded me of being a little girl as I made that first move. It was fabulous.
Talking of your background and when you were a little girl, can you please bring us back to the moment when you started your broadcasting career, your career as a journalist, and what is it that you liked about it?
So I have been a journalist for 40 years. Before you were born.
You can't
that's very
say
sweet,
it.
but yeah, I was a local newspaper journalist, and then I have been broadcasting for about 35 years, and I was one of the first 6 people that set up Sky News 30 years ago. So we've seen a lot of changes since then. When I first started broadcasting with Sky, we had no viewers, and now I broadcast to around about 130 million people a day around the world. But I was still really nervous making that first move today.
It is such an impressive career that you have been describing to us. And now you have a different program that's called K Meets. I was fascinated by how different it is from newscasting. Can you describe the program to those who might not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so I have a program on Sky News in the afternoon between 2 and 5 called The Kay Burley Show, and part of that is a half hour where we call it K Meets. It sounds quite ostentatious, doesn't it, really? I'm quite embarrassed saying it, but it's lovely because what happens is I meet really fascinating, interesting people like Goldie Hawn, who's amazing, or the US ambassador. I interviewed Jeremy Hunt in New York, our foreign secretary, quite recently. And so I get half an hour without any commercial breaks to basically get under the skin of people and find out how people tick. And you'd be surprised how, in a 2 or 3 minute interview, you can't really learn that much about somebody. But if you sit down for half an hour, then you certainly get to learn a lot more about them.
I was curious if you had the chance to sit down with either Magnus Carlsen or Fabiano Caruana.
Oh, don't make me choose.
Let's say you can meet both of them.
Okay, I'd be delighted.
What kind of questions would you ask? I know it takes a lot of preparation to face these interviews, but what would be your feeling? In which direction would you drive the conversation?
So I would be delighted to interview both of them together. How diplomatic was that? And I would be fascinated to see how they interact with each other when they don't have the chessboard between them, because I'm sure they're really good friends. I'm sure they have huge admiration for each other. But equally, they're sportsmen because it's a sport, and so one of them wants to win. And if there's a winner, then there has to be a loser. And one wonders about the impact that actually has on somebody that has spent their whole life for that moment wanting to be the world chess champion, and it's just outside your grasp. So it'd be interesting to see how they interact together. But I'd be delighted to interview both of them, and I can't choose between them, so don't make me.
I think we shall inform the managers of both players that Kay would love to have them on her program.
I would.
I would be fascinated to see it, because I was listening to some of the episodes from your program, and I just really enjoyed the variety of guests you have: politicians, activists, actresses, actors, other hosts. So people from all sorts of different fields, but you always find a way to connect with them.
I hope so. So many of you will know Fred Syriacs, I hope, who is the maitre d' of First Dates. So he was on my programme this week. But probably even more touching for me was a mum and dad whose son was a Marine, and he has served his country, and he was killed on Reunion Island. He was mugged, he was stabbed, murdered on Reunion Island, which is a French territory, 7 years ago. And his family have still not had justice. And they feel that the British government have done little to support them. So I feel that my job is to try to turn a mirror towards British society and say, yeah, we appreciate our service personnel when they go and do this for us and protect us and keep us safe. We cannot turn our faces away when they need us most. So, yeah, although it's fabulous to interview celebrities, I'm much more interested in interviewing people that have real stories to tell and hopefully make a difference.
I'm sure that with all that you do and using your voice to say all the positive messages and all the important messages, like in this case, that you're helping this family to achieve what they couldn't. And now that there's visibility to their story, I'm sure that you have helped them, and you do that with all your other stories as well. And simply the fact that you have been, as you mentioned, for so many years, we can't tell. You look beautiful, you're stunning.
That's very kind, thank you.
I'm really curious, apart from these touching moments, do you have any kind of favorite moments that you thought were really entertaining or funny, and you think back, it still makes you laugh from your broadcasting career?
So many.
Can you just mention some of them?
Who remembers Oliver Reed? Does anybody remember Oliver Reed, the actor, of course? And I was 7 months pregnant at the time. I was 4 stone heavier than I am now. I was like a galleon in full sail. And it was in the afternoon. He came onto the show. He was somewhat relaxed, shall we say. And I was interviewing about something or other. And he leant over towards me and he said, "Shake your funky stuff at me, red thing." It's like, look at the size of me. What are you talking about? And he wouldn't leave the studio. And we had to take an emergency break. And security had to guide him out and plant him back into the green room. But I suppose, news by its very nature is generally bad or sad. So I was on air when the second plane hit during the 9/11 tragedy. I was on air when Diana, Princess of Wales, died. I was on air when Concorde crashed on takeoff in Paris. But I was also on air when, who remembers the 2012 Olympics? I'm sure we all do, don't we? So in 2005, I was in Singapore and I convinced my head of news to let me go for the decision by the International Olympic Committee. And everybody thought the French were going to win, didn't they? Everybody thought Paris was going to host the 2012 Olympics, but we stole it from under the noses of those pesky French. Hopefully there's nobody French who's here. And that was a glorious time. So on occasion, news is fabulous, but generally not so much. Although it means that I can come here and make the first move in the World Chess Championships, which is amazing.
I saw another segment that was from your newscasting career, and I think you were interviewing a professor about the benefits of chocolate, if I can recall correctly.
Probably.
I thought that was great service that you did, at least on my personal level, because I'm trying to convince everybody that chocolate is healthy, and you were eating chocolate while you were interviewing him. I thought that's great, and we have some chocolate if you would like to have
fabulous,
some.
I would. Oh, fabulous. Can I choose which one I like?
Of course.
Excellent. Oh, Snickers. I like it. I like chocolate with nuts in it.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, do you? Oh,
This-
go on, it's so good for you. The professor said so. Thank you.
Sure, I'm always fighting with the rest of the crew, especially our press officer who only eats fruits, and I was fighting with him.
How dull is that?
I know.
Seriously.
Enjoy your chocolate. And
thank you.
Every time we have a guest, what we also ask them is to try to predict the results. So if you look at this position, I know it's only the first few moves. Who do you prefer? Do you think white will win or black will win, or we're going to see a draw?
Well, that's a great question. And what I would say in response to that is, obviously Magnus is amazing, and Fabio is equally fabulous, as his name would suggest. I'm going to go for a draw.
A draw. Somehow it's the most popular decision by our guests. It's the most likely result. Judith, how do you see today's game, and would you predict the same result?
For the moment, I wouldn't predict anything. I think. That's
on the
my
safe
choice
side.
now.
Judith, you need to say something.
We're going to press you. We're going to press you.
Well, okay, if I have to take something just now in private, well, I take Magnus.
In private, among our live and online audience only.
Well, Magnus is at the moment, he's very straightforward, attacking. So let's say I take Magnus for today.
Okay, a victory for
I
Magnus.
can't stand the draw anymore, you know. At least let's talk about that something will happen and decide.
So I've been asking people who know, and they say that there's going to be a winner today.
And that's what they said.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I think it's now on to our live audience. Every day we make a poll among our live audience. So we would like you to tell us the result. What do you think will be today's score? Do you believe that white is going to win today? Can you please raise your hands if that's the case? Okay. What about a draw?
Only
much less votes in other days. And black is going to win today.
Oh, it's Magnus. It's going to be Magnus
Yes,
today.
I think that
For the moment.
anything could happen.
we often come back to the same question and see how the position changes, and then the opinion of our audience usually changes too. But it's been lovely having you here.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much
I'm
for
honoured
joining
to
us.
be here. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Once again, it's been Kay Burley. A big applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was very impressed when I read that Kay has hosted the longest hours on television. You can't tell. She just looks so youthful and energetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite a tense job, I'm sure. We had quite a few moves happening in the meantime, you know, that Magnus is playing very fast. We see him sitting very comfortable in his chair, armchair. And
I think some would argue if that's comfortable, but it's comfortable for Magnus, apparently.
So let's see what we had in the last few moves. We have the position right here, knight d7, but let me go back a few moves where we stopped. It was knight a3, the way Magnus defended the c2 pawn. In principle, the knight should be the one d5 we are having here with white and not the a3. But, of course, later on, it's starting to be pretty concrete. So black had to defend the c7 pawn. That's how he defended. He didn't want to move with his king, so he's able to castle. White continued f3, pushing back the